Hi, everybody. My name is Shlomi Ron. I'm a co-founder at the Visual Storytelling Institute based here in sunny Miami, Florida. I'm super excited to have today a good friend and a fantastic expert in the space of AR and VR, Kathy Hackl. A little bit about Kathy. Kathy is a marketing futurist, a VR AR speaker, evangelist, consultant. She's also the co-chair of the VR AR Association Marketing Committee and one of the women leading the virtual and augmented content revolution. Hackl was also selected as a 2017 Oculus Launchpad Fellow, a program designed to support promising VR content creators. She has spoken about VR and social media in more than 10 countries and has been featured in media outlets like Mike, CNN, Entrepreneur, VentureBeat, and Mashable. Kathy was named by Analytica as leading augmented reality influencer and also by NBC News as one of the top Latina women working in virtual reality. Wow, that's fantastic list. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
Thank you so much for having me. I know we've been trying to get something on the calendar for a while, and I'm just happy that we made it work.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me. Very, very excited.
No, we definitely always excited to speak with you, and especially in a very loaded subject like AR and VR that a lot of marketers, some of them are online right now in our audiences, are grappling with. So we are super excited to have you today. So maybe if you can start telling us a little bit how you get started in AR and VR. I'm sure it was not your day one job.
No, it was. I always say that I came to virtual reality and augmented reality by accident. So back in 2004, I was working at CNN, and part of my job there was to look at the raw footage that was coming in from Iraq so we could tell the affiliates if there was sensitive material. So my job was partly to sit through beheadings, to sit through bodies of soldiers being dragged through the streets of Iraq. So very graphic, gruesome content.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and when you have that type of job where you're seeing these types of things all the time, you kind of switch your humanity switch off a little bit. You turn it off just a little bit, not fully, obviously, but you turn it off just a little bit. And it wasn't until I had my first real virtual reality experience that I didn't really fully turn it back on. So the story behind that is I was at a conference and I had done some 360 video, but nothing like earth moving or shaking.
Right.
And I did confinement. I don't know if you've done it from the Guardian. So confinement puts you in this the solitary confinement cell where prisoners spend 90% of their time. Like that's 90% of your time. And it's a pretty small cell. And when I was in there, I would say, within 2 or 3 minutes, possibly, I got completely claustrophobic and I had to take the headset off. Like it was just one of those ones. So I took the headset off and two things came through my mind. First of all, I was like, wow, this is a very powerful storytelling tool. This is one of the ways that we're going to tell stories in the future. And then the other thing is like, it made me care. It created that empathy or compassion, whatever we want to call it. And I started to care about something I didn't even care about before. So I just understood in my brain how powerful this tool was, this technology was. And I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I did a very hard pivot. It was like, everyone noticed when I did the pivot into VR and AR. So. Oh, wow.
So what was the exact company where you first discovered this AR experience, VR experience?
It's a VR experience. I was at a festival, a journalism festival, a journalism interactive festival. I can't remember what it was.
Oh, got it.
I don't remember the name, but they had different experiences. And
I see.
Yeah, and it was my first real foray into VR and AR content. Like I said, I had done some 360 video, but it wasn't anything earth-shattering. It wasn't until I really had a storytelling experience, a virtual reality experience that had a narrative that I didn't really fully click in my mind. So it was like that day, and from that day on forward, I was a completely different person. But I think that my days as a storyteller in journalism prepared me for what I'm doing right now. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and as part of doing the research for this show, I also understand that you were part of the Oculus Launchpad program. So maybe can you share more about that? I think this is fantastic. Maybe if you can give some background to our audience about Oculus Rift. Yep.
So definitely. So obviously, Oculus is one of the premium headsets that you can use when experiencing virtual reality. There's the HTC Vive. There's the Oculus Rift. Oculus was bought by Facebook a couple of years ago. I think it's for $3 billion. I think that's the number that we finally found out. It's $3 billion. And it's an amazing headset. But they also, with an Oculus, they used to have Oculus Story Studio, which produced content. They no longer have it. But one of the missions and one of the people there leading this revolution in content, let's say, is called Ebony. Ebony, I can't pronounce her name. Peony. And she organized an event called Oculus Launchpad. So the first cohort was in 2016. Second cohort, 2017. That's where I'm a part of that cohort. And the whole idea behind Oculus Launchpad is to give an opportunity to up and coming virtual reality content creators of diverse backgrounds. So to give those people an opportunity to bring their content to the front, to kind of like bring that content up and give us an opportunity. So it was just beautiful. It was lots of women, lots of people of color, just a lot of that LGBTQ, just a lot of diverse voices being part of this cohort where you're actually competing. At the end, you're actually competing for funding for projects. But it was just a beautiful experience to, be invited to Oculus's headquarters and go through this whole training that they put together for you. So for those of you guys that are listening or watching, there's a studio called Felix and Paul. Have you heard of it, Shlomi?
No.
Felix and Paul is based out of Canada, and they have done some of the best virtual reality content. I mean, if someone's going to win an Oscar for VR, it's them for actual VR content, not 2D.
Sure.
Fantastic. They did the one with Obama in the White House. They did a whole bunch of things, and we actually got Paul from Felix and Paul to give us a 360 storytelling and cinematography class. So just the opportunity to be a part of this cohort was fantastic. So.
It sounds like a very kind of front row experience to be part of one of the leading technologies and almost like an accelerator program. It sounds like that really allows you to mentor others how to drive this. So this is fantastic. Great. Yeah. So I just want to kind of peel this huge onion of the subject of visual storytelling. Really start from the top. So one of the things we do with all of our guests, this is kind of a regular question in our show is, what is your definition for visual storytelling? We know it's a new term, and we're always interested in new perspectives.
Okay. Well, it's really interesting because as I was preparing for this, can you hear me okay? Is the connection okay?
Yeah.
Okay. As I was preparing for this interview, I was thinking about storytelling from the VR and AR perspective. And I think that we are in some way, shape, or form, there's two things that I need to discuss. It's like the last screen. I wrote an article that's on your blog, and that's about how we used to be told to sit really far away from the TV, right? We used to be like, you're too far, you're too close, sit back. But it seems that we keep getting closer to the screen. Like now we're like super close. We're like right here on our phones. Yep. In some way, shape, or form, VR and AR are that last screen that is going to be on our eyes, whether it's a virtual reality headset or eventually some smart glasses. So I think that from a visual standpoint and a storytelling standpoint really signals what's coming. So what's coming in this revolution of content, of that visual storytelling. And then within the idea of storytelling in VR and AR, I've been really thinking about this seriously, about how when you go into virtual reality, so to define the terms for folks that don't understand, virtual reality, so augmented reality amplifies your world or enhances your world. It adds a digital element to your world. So like Pokemon Go, or like the dancing hot dog from Snapchat. Yep. Virtual reality really creates new worlds. So it's kind of a paradigm. There's two things going on. You can amplify your world, or you can augment your world, or you can create a new world. So from that standpoint, if you think about storytelling, in some way, shape, or form, VR is story living.
Right. I love that.
Yep. Yeah, because you're going into that story. And then I was thinking about it even harder. And I was thinking from an AR perspective, in some way, shape, or form, is story doing. I know that sounds weird, but it's that story doing where you're actually using your phone or your smart glasses to use augmented reality for utility and context. That's one of my biggest things when it comes to augmented reality. So, and then if you want to get really meta and really deep into it, if you think about the VR story living, it's not just you living the story, but when we have virtual reality powered by artificial intelligence, and we get to the point of reactive content, in some way, shape, or form, that story is alive too. Right. So, you know, that's very like meta and very like in there, but if we look forward to, you know, what's going to come in some shape or form, is that it's that shift in content, exactly what you're talking about, that revolution in content. So
yeah, I think I actually attended obviously remotely the Facebook developer conference when they announced also their virtual reality initiative, and it sounds exactly like you described that. You know, on the higher end, you know, virtual reality, when you have multiple participants in a digital environment interacting together and having some, you know, physical reaction to touch, and also the view the environment around them, and the environment constantly changing. That's another, I think, important factor a lot of people forget, is that with the 360 video, for example, you know, you kind of locked into 360 circle, and you look around, it's going to be the same circle no matter where you're going to look, right? Yeah. But in VR, the environment is constantly fluid. It's actually changing around you, and you see other content, as you said, that you can interact and kind of activate different experiences. So it's not a motion, like motionless at all. Yeah. So yeah, so that's awesome. So one of the things that obviously marketers that are looking to get involved, before we get deep into the process, can you talk a little bit about, you know, at least from what you see in the marketplace, what are the challenges or the problems that kind of prevent marketers to kind of go full throttle with VR today?
I think, you know, one of the things, there's several things that I'm seeing in the market. So one of them is maybe lack of understanding, not so much from the creatives in the team, but maybe sometimes from the higher ups, where they don't really understand the difference. A friend of mine from the VRARA marketing committee shared a story with us, not relevant to their agency or anything, but something that they had heard. That they actually they stepped in to solve this problem. There was a CEO that came to their agency and said, I need a virtual reality campaign, and gave them $500,000 for a campaign. And when they came to show him the final product, they brought an HTC Vive. And he was like, what is that? I wanted that Pokemon Go thing. You know, I wanted Pokemon. So it's like that lack of understanding of what the technologies are and the differences. I think that that's one of the, I mean, and that from a very basic perspective. I also think that doing VR and AR, not just because of the hype is important. It has to make sense. It has to make sense. And that's where storytelling comes in. I've seen very strong storytelling from several brands. And if it makes sense, if it adds to your customer experience, if it adds to your brand story, do it. You know, it amplifies the content. But the problem is that there's a lot of bad content out there, or a lot of content that's, you know, or there's a lot of people trying to replicate 2D content into a realm that is 3D and 360. And it just
only natural, right? Because we got the same example, you know, that the first TV shows look like radio broadcast.
Because that's what we know. That's what we know. But that's the thing. It's like you gotta. It's a complete mindset, shift in mindset. Even how do you write a script? It's a completely, even with augmented reality, there really is no format, let's say, for how do you write an augmented reality storytelling script. So I'll give you guys an example. Riot News, which does a lot of 360, they were bought by by the Huffington Post and by Oath, which used to be AOL or whatever. They actually they're setting up right now. They're trying to hire a whole bunch of augmented reality storytelling writers. So part of the job process, the job interview process, is to submit AR storytelling scripts. And there's no format for this. It's literally, you've got to create something new. We're all building the future here. So that's one of the exciting things for sure.
No, absolutely. So if a marketer, he understands right now it's a challenge of education, there is maybe a cost issue, maybe the experience is not really well defined. So let's say we have some brands with the VP of marketing or CMO that feel like they have some budget to experiment and they would like to allocate some dollars to VR. So what do you see, typically as the most common business objectives that marketers could use AR or VR?
I think from VR, it's about the experience, having them experience something different. For example, Patron, the tequila Patron, did an experience called The Art of Patron, which took you inside how the tequila is created, all the way from the fields of the mezcal, through their hacienda, through the processing, all the way to your table. They did this through like a CG live action kind of thing. It was pretty interesting. But when one of the people in the marketing team talked about is about being remembered and about being, about that experience. So if you're putting on a headset and you're a brand, you're trying to tell a story, it's about being remembered. It's about creating that experience for the consumer, not just, pushing something onto them, which I thought was a really interesting thing. So it's a really interesting perspective if you think about it. How do you use these tools correctly? We're all forging the future. I do have to say, from an augmented reality standpoint, if a brand has some budget left over and they want to experiment, as much as I love virtual reality, I would also think that it might be interesting for them to try augmented reality, because VR is still very hard to scale. Because you can do you can do it on Facebook or YouTube 360, what have you, but it's still hard to scale because you still have the problem of the headsets being very expensive, needing virtual reality PC. That's changing. There's some solutions coming down the line, which obviously are very exciting. But right now it's still very hard to scale. So what do most people have on their phone? They have on their hands, a cell phone. So I think, if you're trying to get a little bit more reach, maybe augmented reality might be one of the ways to go.
Yeah. So it's go ahead, sorry.
No, but I was going to say, if they, like, for example, if a company does have some extra marketing dollars, I would suggest that they even set up an innovation center in their office, so that they're not only their creative team, but the people in that office, in that company, can get exposed to these technologies, because you don't know who's going to have a bright idea or a great idea. It could be someone, it could be someone that does a certain job and says, this would be really great for showing what we do, or I don't know, exposing people to this technology. I think would be really important to get those creative juices flowing. So yeah. So
it sounds like this stage in the game, we're mostly looking at brand awareness. If you look at the buying journey, it's top of the funnel. Business objectives like brand awareness, getting it to the utmost richer experience using VR or AR, with preference to AR because it has more scalability from an audience size. So marketers would find that more appealing, because obviously VR, as you said, it's more stationary, more expensive, probably more suitable for events where you want to showcase on the spot some experiences, but mobile AR definitely. Can you talk a little bit about more kind of a mid-funnel or kind of even bottom-funnel objectives? How could you use immersive technology like this?
It's and I'm not trying to diss VR, because I love VR. I'm just saying, like, if they have some money left over and they're worried about scalability, it's probably going to have to be AR from a scalability perspective. That being said, some of the things I just saw at Advertising Week blew my mind. So I'll give you an example. One of my clients, actually, UVisit, who I do some work for, they just launched this virtual reality experience with Swarovski, the crystal, the Austrian crystal company that also has a home collection. So they brought the collection, they filmed the collection in 360, they did this beautiful tour, but they partnered with MasterPass. So MasterPass is MasterCard. And at Shop.org, they unveiled this experience where actually you're able to purchase within the virtual reality experience.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Which is fantastic. It is truly, it solves one of the problems of like, how do you get, you can get people through the funnel. How do you qualify them? How do you actually get them to take action? So within that experience, like this thing pops up and you can like purchase. Let's say I want this vase, or I want this, whatever it is from the, and especially high ticket items that are only available in certain showrooms. It was a very interesting case study as far as how to do it. So that's one of the things I saw that has really blown my mind from a funnel perspective, getting people through the funnel to actually purchase something. We'll see what the numbers are, how many people actually purchased. I don't know that.
Right.
That was one thing. So.
No, this is, it reminds me, a couple of years ago, remember that virtual world that all the major brands rushed in to create a digital presence, and then it just disappeared.
Second life, yeah.
Second life, exactly. So it's kind of interesting to see how we experiencing maybe a comeback now that we have AR and VR to some extent. So let's talk about, you said that mobile AR is most likely the most logical entry point for a lot of brands if they want to experiment. So can you kind of describe, how the end-to-end process look like from the moment, I got approval from my CEO for experimental budget, I'm the CMO, and I want to start a mobile AR program?
So from that perspective, I think it's not because I do this for a living, but I think it's really important for those people in the marketing team or agencies that don't really understand what they can do to reach out to someone that knows what the technology can and cannot do yet.
Right.
That's important because it's because sometimes they'll come up with ideas and you're like, well, that's great, but we're not there with the technology yet, or they'll come up with an idea and you're like, well, why don't we do it this different way and add interactivity,
right,
or add multiplayer? So start with, if you have someone on your team that knows AR, then awesome. If not, try to find someone that can help you figure it out, how to use storytelling, how to use tools, and then move forward and craft. There's going to be iterations, there's going to be, you have to try out the triggers. Sometimes a trigger, what I mean by a trigger is the image that triggers a certain thing to happen in augmented reality through your camera.
Right.
You have to make sure those triggers are correct. That sometimes you might plan a really cool augmented reality activation, but then when you get to the place, the lighting's not really great and your camera sometimes has an issue figuring out. So it's just a lot of things that you really need to do quality assurance for, right, when it comes to a campaign. But really, I think it's one of the things is, what does success look like for that campaign, especially with metrics, just because it's so new? Like, what are the metrics? Is it downloads? Is it people that shared? Is it, that's the thing. I think that having clear metrics, or what success could look like for that campaign, for that brand, I think it's gonna be really important. So it's not just like, oh, we did an activation and only 100 people saw it.
Yep.
I think that you need to have an idea of what success would look like.
And even before going into the metrics, which I definitely would like to kind of probe this deeper, but in terms of the actual technology, I mean, I know that one of the challenges with augmented reality is that, up till, I would say recently, you would need to install a separate app in your device in order to consume augmented reality. And maybe now with iOS 11, with the Apple Arcade, we start seeing some examples. I just saw the other day that IKEA started a first integration with Arcade. But can you talk a little bit about the technology barriers, how you can minimize the barriers of entry so you can maximize the reach of your audience?
That's a really great question. And I'm going to answer honestly, meaning because I've got about 12 to 15 AR apps on my phone right now.
Yep.
Am I using them every day? No, not really. That's why I think for augmented reality to really take off and to really become that next computing platform or whatever we want to call it, it has to solve problems.
Right.
So it's got to use utility. It's got to bring utility.
Yep.
And it's got to bring context. Because my biggest thing is that augmented reality, mixed reality, are going to contextualize our reality. That's how I frame it. It's going to contextualize a consumer's reality. And by what I mean by this, it's going to help us understand certain things better that are abstract. It's going to help us order something at a restaurant in a healthier way, if that's what we're looking to do. It's going to help us connect with certain people that we would have never connected with at an event, for example. So the easiest way to show a little bit of what I mean. So during Hurricane Irma, a lot of us in Florida obviously were very affected. The Weather Channel was using augmented reality in their shows. And instead of someone behind a desk telling me there's going to be 10 inches of rain, they actually had graphics in augmented reality. They used the HoloLens for this that showed you what it would look like at 5 inches, what would it look like at 10 inches, what happens at 15 inches. And I think that bringing that, showing people what that really looks like, or what that could really like, that contextualizing things was extremely helpful. Right. I think from a visual storytelling standpoint. And I think that that's how augmented reality can be extremely powerful if it brings utility and context. And I keep preaching about this. It's about utility and context. Until we don't have those two things really solidified and augmented, it's still going to be a little gimmicky. So
no, absolutely, I think you hit on a very important point, especially with the context component, because I think that when you look at the storytelling arc, you definitely want to have as part of your story, you want to show your audience how life would look like in a case of success, or how they would look like in terms of failure, which is kind of staging the high stakes. So I think this is really augmented reality from that perspective. The ability to visualize different outcomes for your buyer's journey or your customer challenges opens up really fascinating opportunities for marketers, because this is something that is not dependent on time, space. It's not, you don't have to build a new construction, it's all digital. And the beauty that it's adds on to a physical, real life experience.
And even the implications that it has beyond marketing, because I mean, obviously I'm in the marketing side of things, but the future of work, the future of training, the future of disaster preparedness. I mean, this technology has massive implications for the betterment of society. And Absolutely. I think that, that's where I think a lot of times things are lost. There's something in technology that we call Amara's Law. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Okay. So for those people that don't know, it's basically that we overhype the next 5 years, let's say, but we underhype the next 10. So I think that that's really important to realize, okay, yes, we're living this is a hype cycle. We're all in on VR and AR like myself, but in reality, I'm trying to think about it from the long-term perspective of the impact that this will have on us moving forward as a society. So very interesting. So maybe I should even write an article about that for your blog.
Absolutely. We'd love to have your contribution every time. So when you think about mobile AR, just to kind of close this subject, do you see like dominant categories of use cases? I know that Facebook, when they presented their AR, they talked about one category being information displays in retail. Then they talk about enhancements, those nice everything that you see that Snapchat came up with the first, so they kind of replicate that. But do you see these common categories in AR?
Definitely. I mean, definitely there's so many categories it can impact. Everything from That's why that's why I said contextualize and utility and context, because that kind of is really broad in a
Right.
sense. You know, and then with augmented reality, there's a discussion on if VR and AR are the end of the pre-roll in the banner ads, and that's a really interesting conversation to have. I'm like, well, maybe it's not necessarily the end of it. It's going to be something different. You know, we're all kind of opting out of the ads or opting out of, you know, banners or pop-ups or what have you, or in some way. So what is this going to turn into in that VR and AR world? So
interesting.
So it's a really interesting conversation. And one of the things I always say with a virtual reality experience, product placement, for example, in a VR experience cannot be done blatantly, because it's so incredibly like, it's just in your face and people don't like being sold to. So you gotta do it from a different perspective if you're doing product placement in VR. So yeah, that's just some of the things that, you know, that have come through my mind. So
yeah, I used to work in the product placement industry years ago in Hollywood, so I definitely understand how this the dynamics of integrating brands into entertainment content or branded content. So yeah, so going back to, now that we get some sense of the process, you kind of lightly touched on the how do you measure success. So if we take the example of AR, mobile AR and VR, can you give us just what are the KPIs, what we should look for?
It's the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
It really is the wild, wild west, because it depends if you're doing mobile, if you're doing a HoloLens campaign. It's really going to depend on a lot of things. I mean, at least with VR, there's certain, like there's heat maps and there's certain things you can do in VR. There's actually a company called... Exactly. There's a company called Retinad, which I spoke to at Advertising Week, and they're doing a lot of stuff on the metric side of things for 360 and VR, which I thought was interesting. From an AR perspective, I mean, I think it's a little bit out there, especially because you could be doing a campaign, like I said, for the HoloLens. You could be doing a campaign for mobile. You could be doing a campaign for the Mira headset, which is the new one where you put your phone in. You could be doing, you know, how are we going to measure success in the new Lenovo augmented realities Star Wars one? Is it, you know, is it how many times someone plays? Is it, you know, I think it'll be interesting to see what the metrics are. That's why I think it's important for marketers when they sit down with a client or an agency or a brand to figure out what do you want to accomplish at the end and what does success look like for this brand in this specific campaign.
So it sounds like that it's still a wild west and we're still kind of writing the rules as we go.
Yeah.
And you can borrow some of the metrics that are available in digital marketing.
But we're going to create our own metrics. Trust me, like we are going to create our own metrics because it's a completely different discipline. So, yeah.
So there's no IAB scorecard yet.
Not yet. There should be ethics though. I am a big proponent of best practices and ethics when it comes to these new technologies, because you will have a lot of things that will pop up. I mean, I can't really discuss some of these, but there's certain things that are already popping up that you're like, how do you manage something like this? When, you know, let's say something pops up in augmented reality that is fake or is, you know, masking a product with another product's brand, or I mean, so many things that can pop up in literally in augmented reality. So
cool. So, you know, you've been active in the space for a while, and you know, you probably saw a ton of different examples of campaigns and things that worked and did not work. What would you say, you know, maybe one or two examples that for you kind of represent, you know, the state of art? That's how it should be done for AR. That's how it should be done for VR.
So I'll tell you two things. I'll talk about one of the campaigns I was involved in called Beefeater XO, which we did at Future Lighthouse. It was actually nominated for a Tribeca X. And the Tribeca X is an award given by Tribeca Film Festival that awards the intersection of storytelling, advertising, and cinematography, let's say. It's kind of like a very inclusive, amazing award. Basically, this experience was a virtual reality experience taking you inside the brain of a very famous chef in Spain. It was sponsored by Beefeater, which is a gin brand. And instead of like saying drink Beefeater and make this cocktail, it was more like, how does this chef envision certain cities? So there was kind of his interpretation. He's very eclectic, of course. So his interpretation of what London is and what Venice is and what Bangkok is and what Mumbai is. So it was going inside his brain, going on these very trippy, eccentric places in his mind. And yes, there's thing that says Beefeater in one of them, but it wasn't really pushing the gin. And I think that was one of the things that made it successful. From that perspective, it was like, it was fun. And there was kind of it was an arc. Like you said, it was like a storytelling. Everyone ended up, like, no matter what your journey was, everyone ended up in London in a party inside Big Ben.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's cool.
That was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was quite successful. The way they did to scale it, let's say, other than like people downloading something on their phone, they did a tour through malls, through certain malls in Spain where they had the chairs that you could go around and et cetera, et cetera. So that's one way that they got more and more people to experience it. So, and they did a whole, and it was just not just a campaign that was VR, it was what they call transmedia. I know we don't use that a lot in the US or something, but it's a transmedia campaign where you're using all these different elements and kind of like pushing this forward.
That's cool. So. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely think, especially with augmented reality, the ability to visualize different outcomes to your storyline, it's really fantastic, because it's something that I know it's been done to some extent in theater, when you think about with the participatory theater, where you can take it whatever direction. So yeah, so this is another expression of this theme, I guess.
I'm a huge fan of immersive theater. I mean, Sleep No More changed my life. Sleep No More, Then She Fell. I mean, I'm always looking for these amazing experiences where it's literally like going into VR. The way I tell people is like, if you don't understand virtual reality, go to one of these and you'll totally understand it. Because it's what they're doing is this immersive theater where you're, and no matter how many times you go, it's always going to be a different story. And that goes in line with the idea of reactive content, which I know, there's companies working on creating actual reactive content. In some ways, shapes or form, this is kind of that future of entertainment. And choose your own story, whatever you want to call it, but it's that reactive content that's even more personalized. So it's incredibly impactful. And even if you look at something like Disney, so Disney's launching, they're going to have their Star Wars park, and within the park, they're going to have a hotel, which is going to be a fully immersive experience. Right. And by that, I mean that when you go in, you check in and you're a character and you live that character however long your stay is. Okay. Very interesting, because you're kind of like doing this thing where you're fully immersed in this park and you like take someone else's identity, and it's just really fun. I'm actually going to do an experience like that in New York called the Path of Beatrice, where it's all done by this company it's called Paradiso. And basically it's a 3 or 4 day experience. And you literally are trying to like solve these, like, it's just a mind blowing. I can't tell you what it is because I haven't done it yet, but I know that they send you to different places. Like they text you, you have to meet a stranger at a restaurant. You have to do all these things. Oh, wow. And
that's going to be VR? That's going to be VR or AR?
No, it's real. It's real. It's like real immersive, like real people. Like
real people. I see. Got it.
Real people. I mean, you got to pay for it, but
oh, that's cool.
But yeah. It's trippy. I mean, I can't wait to do it and kind of experience that, because it's kind of living that VR from the outside. Absolutely. Kind of thing. So.
Yeah, and that's what we keep saying about stories. They allow your audience to kind of vicariously live the life of the experiences of the hero through the story. So obviously, with technology, VR and AR are the new enablers to allow you to experience whatever the protagonist is seeing. And get a more impact from the story.
Well, you become part of the story. You become the protagonist, or you become whatever it is that you are within the story. But that agency that you are given when you're going into these experiences is
Mhm.
amazing. And once they solve the problem of reactive content, it's even more personalized.
Yep.
So what's coming is a revolution. I mean, as far as content goes, it's a true revolution.
I think from
So
that
I mean, I'm
perspective,
excited about the future.
yeah, no, I think, talking about storytelling and immersive technology, I think probably the next step, and I'm kind of curious what you think, it's really about playing the role of choreography, where you give an actual role for your audience. So it's not just like let me give you a hand and we're going to walk through the story that I created for you. No, I'm going to give you a specific role. So you have an actual protagonist role in this story that's going to interact with the other people in the story. So it's not just you as a passive, kind of almost like a Epcot Center, you're sitting on this little, a wagon and just going through the exhibit and seeing stuff. No, you can actually influence the plot line.
Well, I think it'll eventually come down to when we get home, people want to unwind. And sometimes sometimes they just want to watch TV on a flat screen. They'll turn on, I'll give you an example, like a movie like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they'll watch that. But let's say they want something else. They are going to be able to put on a headset, sit next to their wife or husband and go into a movie like Mr. and Mrs. Smith and live that movie from Angelina Jolie's perspective or Brad Pitt's perspective. So it'll come down to that. Do you want to be an active participant of your entertainment, or do you want to just kind of like be more of observe from a further out perspective? So yeah, I think what's coming is really interesting. It's going to be really interesting from that perspective. And even like I said, the concept that the story that you're going into, especially in VR, is alive. And, I mean, I know it sounds weird, but with AI, reactive content, in some way, the story is going to be alive. Yeah. So that is powerful.
It sounds like even, now that you describe it this way, think about, going to a salad bar and you look up at the menu and you see, do you have your preset salads options, or create your own? And that's exactly
create your own, exactly.
So some people will be more creative that don't want to choose, the Greek salad, which is, they have a preset expectations of what it's going to be like. They're going to want to be kind of create and be in fluid motion of discovery. So
yeah, and you can change it up. Like sometimes you want the Greek salad, sometimes you want to go crazy and do something else. So, so I think it'll be really interesting. I think from that personalization of entertainment and content. So
yeah, so maybe kind of in closing, maybe can you give our audience some general 2 or 3 tips, from your experience being active in the space, what are the 2 or 3 things they could keep in mind?
Try to understand the technology as much as you can. Not everyone has the technical skills, let's say, to develop, but try to understand the technology and what goes behind it. Stay updated, learn, educate yourself. I think that's one of them. And one of my things is like, you cannot talk about these technologies unless you're spending time in a headset or, or using AR. Like that's one of the things. Like I'm an active consumer of these things. That's one of the things that's like, you better be spending time on the headset or better be, using AR to really understand what's going on. And I pay a lot of attention when I'm out there. I'm paying a lot of attention to what I'm seeing. And I'm like, wow, they just augmented my kids' menu at Denny's, or that's something. And you've probably seen this on my Facebook. I keep my eye out for everything. Like I was in New York, and there's there's in the cab, there's this little thing with a ticker on the bottom. It says virtual reality and art collide at blah 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 museum. And I keep seeing it pop up everywhere. I was at Publix yesterday, and all of a sudden I turn a corner. They're selling virtual reality headsets. I go to CVS, and they're selling 360 virtual reality gift greeting cards. So just keep your eyes out. Keep your eyes out because this is coming. Yeah, it's not. This is not 3D television.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. No, that's so true. Yeah. So I understand also that you are about to publish a new book, VR Marketing. Maybe you can talk just lightly about that, and also how can people contact you? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, So basically, it's we're writing a my co-author, myself, my co-author is Samantha Wolf. We're writing a book on virtual reality and augmented reality marketing. So it's you know, we want to give people actionable items. We want to educate people. That want it to be an educational resource for them. We're going to have plenty of information in there for people to learn what's going on, to understand what's going on, and give them, you know, history, but also give them ideas on how to use it in the future. So the book's going to come out at the end of October, beginning of November. We're working on that right now, and it's going to be on. It's going to be available on Amazon or in, you know, either Kindle version or printed version, depends what people want. And we're just really excited to be able to bring really what is the first, in some way, shape, or form, virtual reality, augmented reality marketing toolkit or a book out there. So we're working really hard on finishing it up right now. It looks like we'll be launching the book around the time of the Digital Marketing World Forum in New York. So we're very excited about that. So yeah, if you go to my website, you can get notified when the book comes out. And people that get notified before will get a discount, a very good discount on the book. So
cool. And how can people contact you if they have any questions or would like to engage?
Yes. Go to kathyhackl.com. So CATHYHACKL.com, or follow me on Twitter, tweet at me. I'm pretty good about answering questions. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Anywhere, any of those. I'm very active on social, as you know. So
yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Kathy, for a fascinating chat today about the brave new world of AR and VR. And we're gonna, obviously this show is recorded both in video and also is gonna be syndicated on our Visual Storytelling Today podcast. So you can consume the content from there. Cool, so thank you so much, Kathy. You know, that was a really fantastic conversation, and I'm sure the audience, both today and in the future, that's actually gonna watch this or listen to our podcast will get a lot of valuable information. So thank you for that. And I hope to see you in our next show of Visual Storytelling Today. So until next time, don't keep your story waiting.
thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.